Good evening. I'm calling the regular meeting of the University Place City Council for Monday, January 4th, 2021 to order. We are conducting our meeting remotely in compliance with the special Open Public Meeting Act rules issued by Governor Inslee's emergency order. City Clerk, can you please conduct the roll call?
Yes, Mayor. Councilmember Figueroa.
Councilmember Figueroa present.
Councilmember Keel.
Councilmember Keel, present.
Councilmember Pro Tem Lee.
Councilmember Pro Tem Lee, present.
Councilmember McCluskey.
Councilmember McCluskey, here.
Councilmember Fleming. Mayor Pro Tem Worthington.
Mayor Pro Tem Worthington, present.
Mayor Bellisi.
Mayor Bellisi here. I believe Councilmember Fleming should hopefully be joining us shortly. Wait a minute, he's stuck in traffic, so he's going to be coming late. Can I have a motion to approve his late arrival?
Mayor Bellisi, this is Mayor Pro Tem Worthington, and I move we approve Councilmember Fleming's attendance with a late arrival.
This is Councilmember Keel, and I second.
Okay, do I have any objections? Okay, seeing none, motion carries. At this time, may I have a motion to approve our agenda?
Mayor Bellisi's Mayor Pro Tem Worthington again, and I move approval of the agenda this evening.
Councilmember Keel, and I second.
I have a first and a second. Are there any objections to approving the agenda as submitted? Okay, seeing none and hearing none, the agenda passes unanimously. This evening, as we have some presentations. Oh, wait a minute. Yeah, Pledge of Allegiance. I'm sorry. I just skipped by it. Councilmember Pro Tem Lee, could you please conduct the Pledge of Allegiance for us? I apologize.
Yes, Madam Mayor. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Councilmember Pro Tem Lee. All right, so then now we're on to the presentations this evening. We have 3 commissioners, one planning commissioner and 2 parks advisory commissioners that we are doing a certificate of recognition for, as 2 of them have reached the end of their terms in their appointments, and 1 resigned here this last year. Unfortunately, I don't believe any of the 3 of them are here, but I would like to just read the certificates of recognition briefly. We have Tanya Mashalo. Her service as member of the University Place Planning Commission from March 20th, 2017 to November 4th, 2020. During her term on the Planning Commission, Mrs. Mashalo was a key contributor and valued advisor to the City Council. Mrs. Mashalo participated in several city planning efforts, including but not limited to amendments of the city's comprehensive plan, shoreline master program, and use regulations, amendments to the zoning code regarding signs, drive-through restaurants, and extended stay lodging at Chambers Creek properties. Mrs. Mashalo helped the city establish a regional growth center sub-area plan and a form-based code. The dedication to this important work exhibited by Mrs. Mashalo is greatly appreciated. This is being presented on January 4th, 2021. I really appreciate the valuable work that she has done on the Planning Commission. It is one of our most technical commissions that we have, and it requires a lot more time and effort than our other commissions do because of this technical work. And having served on the commission myself for 16 years, I know what effort it took to get these regulations reviewed and done. And for that, I really appreciate her time and service there. The other two certificates of recognition we have, as I stated earlier, is the our University Place Parks Advisory Commission, and I will read the two certificates of recognition. The City Council of the City of University Place would like to recognize Steve Thorndale for his service as member of the University Place Parks Advisory Commission from April 2nd, 2018 to September 25, 2020. During his term on the Parks Advisory Commission, Mr. Thorndale was a key contributor and valued advisor to the City Council. Mr. Thorndale participated in a significant number of city park efforts, including but not limited to a major update of the city's open space and recreation plan. In the last years of his service on the commission, Mr. Thorndale served as the commission chair. The dedication to this important work exhibited by Mr. Thorndale is greatly appreciated. Presented on January 4th, 2021. And I have valued and appreciated the time and effort and the diligence with which Mr. Thorndale took to heart his work on the Parks Advisory Commission. There were a lot of significant issues and ideas that were brought forward and were worked on by Mr. Thorndale and on behalf of the commission. And he brought a lot of items to our attention that we have looked at and reviewed and approved. And without him and his service as the chair of the commission, I doubt that our update on our parks plan, Parks and Open Space Recreation Plan, would be the document that it is and was approved by council in late 2020. So for that, I do recognize and thank Mr. Thorndale for his efforts. The last one is also on the Parks Advisory Commission. It's for Jack Machalo. We are recognizing his service as a member of the University Place Advisory Commission from March 20th, 2017 to January 31st of 2021. During his term on the Parks Advisory Commission, Mr. Machalo was a key contributor and valued advisor to the City Council. Mr. Machalo participated in a significant number of city park efforts, including but not limited to a major update of the city's open space and recreation plan. In the last years of his service on the commission, Mr. Machalo served as the commission co-chair. The dedication to this important work exhibited by Mr. Machalo is greatly appreciated. And this is also presented on January 4th of 2021. And again, without his dedicated service and his support of the chair's position, our Parks and Recreation Open Space Plan would not have been accomplished and been open to public input. So for that, I want to thank Mr. Machalo for his efforts, and both of those positions are going to greatly be missed on the Parks Advisory Commission. So I want to thank both of them, and I understand that Mr. Thorndale is here this evening listening to this presentation. And again, thank you so much for your dedication and volunteer work. Without those efforts, we would not have the community and the Parks and Open Space program that we have. So thank you. Okay, at this time, we're at the public comments portion of our meeting. As of 5:30 this evening, we did not receive any public comments via email as required. And so we will move on to our next item on the agenda, which is our consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve or amend the consent agenda as proposed? You are muted, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. Yes, Mayor Belisi, Steve Worthington, Mayor Pro Tem, and I would move approval of the consent agenda as distributed.
Thank you. I have a first. Do I have a second?
Councilmember Keel, I second.
Okay, I have a first and a second. Are there any objections to approval of the consent agenda as submitted? Okay, not seeing any or hearing any, the approval of the consent agenda passes unanimously. Thank you. Our next item on the agenda is our council consideration. It's the Olympic Brookside Storm Drainage Improvement Project, and I understand we have our Director of Public Works, Gary Cooper, here with a staff presentation. Mr. Cooper.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, council members. Thank you for allowing me to be the very first up, hitting the ground running, the first meeting of the year. So we're right at it. Tonight, we bring before you the Olympic Brookside Storm Drainage Improvement Project. This is the project Finance Director Blaisdell briefed you on during the CIP presentation back on November 2nd, and is the next phase of the Soundview Drainage Basin improvements. Stormwater from Grandview, Olympic, and Brookside flow into the Soundview storm drain system. And as you may recall, over the last number of years, we've been working to improve the Soundview Basin drainage system, upsizing the downstream conveyance system, improving flows, and increasing capacity. These improvements to the lower system allow us to take on the next phase, which includes the upper Brookside Way to Olympic and Grandview at the roundabout and ultimately up to 40th Street. This phase will resolve the most concerning portions of the entire system, the flooding of private properties along Olympic Drive, the Grandview roundabout, and the blockage or plugging where the open ditch enters the enclosed system along Brookside Way, which has caused flooding of additional private properties. Severe rainfall events seem to be increasing, and we continue to experience problems as exampled by, in December of 2019, flooding at the roundabout at Grandview Drive was flooded with over 12 inches of water, creating a potentially hazardous driving condition, damaging both public and private properties. This storm event caused the flooding of private property to the west of the intersection, including 2 duplexes. These duplex properties have been flooded 4 times in the last few years due to this problem. During these severe storms, twice in the last 3 years, runoff flowing along Brookside Way with such force it overwhelms the channel, eroding the shoulder, requiring emergency repairs to prevent further damage to the roadway. 1 year ago, a severe storm generated enough runoff that debris within the Brookside Way ditch line was carried downstream, blocked the inlet near Palisades. Even though the inlet's 8 feet below the street level, the stormwater eventually overflowed, flooding lower Brookside Way, eroding the edge of pavement, and sending cubic yards of gravel from the shoulder, depositing it into the street and adjacent properties, including one garage along Brookside. So tonight we're asking your authorization to move forward with the professional services agreement with Gray and Osborne for the design of this final portion of the project in an amount not to exceed $181,000. With that short summary, I'd like to welcome your questions you may have regarding the final stage of this project.
Okay, at this time, are there any questions regarding this proposed project? Councilmember Lee, you had your hand raised. You are muted.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Gary, for your presentation. Will this project have any adverse effect on the wetlands that adjacent the current Apple Orchard Park?
It won't have any adverse effect on it. This part of the design is to study and do some geotechnical work in there. Part of this problem we have on this whole system is storage. When we have the 100-year event, there's just too much water that comes from Olympic, from the high school, basically all the way from from Grandview, or excuse me, from up near Safeway. So what we're doing, we're in verbal negotiations with the church on the corner of Olympic and Grandview. And the proposal is to build an underground storage facility under their parking lot with 20,000 cubic feet of storage. That will be a big help. The other thing we want to do is do some geotechnical work because while 20,000 cubic feet is a lot of water, it's not enough to handle everything for when we get these 100-year storms that happen in, say, an hour. And so what we want to do is a possibility, we want to look into, if we get to the point that the 20,000 feet isn't enough, can we run water into the existing wetlands at the current orchard and then back out, let it use that existing area as some storage and then let it back out? We're looking for storage for like the 4 to 6 hour type of event. So we're going to do some geotechnical work in there to see if that's possible, check out the soils capacity. So definitely, I knew that question was coming up, and I thought instead of trying to cram it into my presentation, the wetland has to stay a wetland. It can't turn into a pond such as we have Adriana Hess. That's not even allowable. But we're going to spend close to $1 million, $800,000 putting underground storage in the church parking lot. If we could use that wetland area as a reservoir of storage for the 4 to 6 hour type event, we could probably save $1 million. And so that's part of the investigation. That would be a second phase of this project. The first phase is to work from the roundabout, build the storage underneath the church parking lot, and then do some remediation in the ditch line on Brookside. So if we could use the orchard existing wetlands, that would be a second phase, but I wanted to include it in this design just because it's cheaper to get it all done at one time versus break it into two.
Okay, Gary, thank you. Yeah, I was just concerned about the maintaining the proper balance in those wetlands. I don't know, that sounds like a monumental task, especially when you have these large water events that occur every so often. Anyway, thank you very much.
Okay, Councilmember McCluskey, you had your hand raised.
Yes, thank you. And Gary, thank you for time this afternoon to explain the scope and the intent of this proposal going forward. And as I reviewed it and went down to number 3 again, I'm still a little uncomfortable with the verbiage as to the intent of where we're trying to drive at, because we don't really want to build a engineered retention pond there. You know, that was pretty much what you had reflected back to me, which I like that concept and I like that direction. I like your sensitivity approach to it so that it remains an organic looking park that fits in naturally with the scope of the rest of the park. However, you know, when this project comes back and number 3 is back on the table, my fear is that you're not going to be around. And you know, I want to ensure that the next person continues on your vision and your sensitivity of this park. So when I read construct an overflow detention pond, I reflect back on this discussion that I had with the engineering staff many moons ago when I was on the Adriana Hess committee and the Parks Committee. And the intention for that was to be a little more organic looking structure next to Adriana Hess. And there was design concepts and things, but that sort of went by the wayside when I believe Parks lost some funding, and Joan Lawson had a change of scope in her duties as well. And so we have what we have there, and I don't want that to be a slippery slope in that direction. So if we could change some of that verbiage to, you know, with the intention as you had stated, to Council Pro Tem Lee and to me earlier today, so that the direction isn't to construct an overflow detention, but to investigate the possibilities. And if so, it's to remain an organic detention overflow. That would be, I would feel more comfortable passing this because I may not be around when it comes back again as well. Who knows what the future has, but I want to ensure that that piece is properly identified and reflected as to the direction for the designers and the scope of work.
So I hope you don't know something I don't know about my tenure, but
Or my tenure as well.
the plan is, if we get this approved tonight, to come back with the construction documents for number 1 and number 2 to construct this year. That's all we have the money for. But with that note, I can easily, with your approval, change, and I already did it. I struck out construct and used your word investigate. And that's certainly the intent. The engineer wrote it this way, but I do know, as I stated earlier, that is a wetland. We're required to keep it that way. I cannot build a detention pond there. I would never get a permit to do that. So I can easily change that, council member. I've already done it.
Okay. All right. Thank you, sir.
And going back
I
to your question,
appreciate
you know something I don't? I mean, do I need to get my affairs in order?
No, we want you to stay a long, long time. But I may not be around a long, long time. Who knows? As the Islamic culture states, inshallah, may God willing, right?
Are there any other questions of Mr. Cooper at this time? Okay, this is a item for council consideration and allows for public comment. As of 5:30 this evening, no public comment was received via email, nor is there anyone on the meeting this evening that from the public to speak. So I am closing the public comment section at this time. So at this time, may I have a motion for council consideration?
Mayor Belisi, I move that that we approve, excuse me, let me get the language in front of me. Authorize the city manager to execute a professional service agreement with Gray and Osborne for design, engineering, and development of construction documents for the Olympic Brookside Storm Drainage Improvement Project in the amount of not to exceed $181,000.
Okay, I have a first. Do I have a second?
Councilmember Keel, I second.
Okay, I have a first and a second. Now it's council discussion. Councilmember Figueroa, do you have any comments regarding this issue?
Councilman Figueroa does not have any comments.
Okay, Councilmember Keel.
Councilmember Keel, the only comment is it sounds like a great plan to keep all the water back, and I hope everything that we find works out to what we want it to be.
Okay. Councilmember Pro Tem Lee, any comments at this time?
Councilmember Pro Tem Lee, I have no comments at this time.
Okay. Councilmember McCluskey.
No further comments. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Fleming yes, Councilmember Fleming is here. Do you have any comments regarding the Olympic Brookside Storm Drainage Improvement Project?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilmember Fleming has no comments.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem Worthington, do you have any comments at this time?
Mayor Pro Tem Worthington, just briefly, and I appreciate the efforts to make this an effective project at the least cost so that we can find alternatives to heavy construction costs that may come out in our second phase. And I also appreciate that we're attending to the details to maintain that area in a natural state as possible in terms of the second phase and what may come about on the current apple orchard wetland as we think of it. Councilmember McCluskey and Lee's comments were helpful in that. Thank you.
Okay. I want to thank everybody for their comments regarding this. You pretty well covered mine, so for time saving, I won't repeat them. At this time, may I ask our clerk for a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Figueroa,
Councilmember Figueroa, yay.
Councilmember Keel,
Councilmember Keel, aye.
Councilmember Pro Tem Lee,
Councilmember Pro Tem Lee, aye.
Councilmember McCluskey,
Councilmember McCluskey, aye.
Councilmember Fleming,
Councilmember Fleming, aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Worthington,
Mayor Pro Tem Worthington, aye.
and Mayor Belisi.
Mayor Belisi, aye.
The motion carries, Mayor.
Thank you very much. At this time, we are at our city manager and council comments and report section. May I ask our city manager, Mr. Sugg, to provide us with his city manager report.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Happy New Year, everyone, and to those that are watching this program. Two updates, Mayor and Council, the ones that I've reported on previously, but are worth giving you some updates as we enter this new year. The significant project, probably our most significant project of 2020 was the Cirque Drive Phase 3 project, the $2 million project that City Council awarded the bid on in May 4th of 2020, 8 months ago, exactly today. That project is grant funded. It's federally funded with a local match, and our SWIM funds provide the local match and installing storm drain pipes and catch basins and the like. It was designed in-house by our city's engineering department, and it completes Cirque Drive. I know I mentioned this before, but it's worth mentioning it again, that our first section of Cirque Drive was built 24 years ago, close to 25. And so this last 3/4 mile section of Cirque Drive completes it all the way from Grandview Drive to Orchard. So this particular section is it still looks like pretty fresh concrete if you drive along there. You'll notice some things are missing. The decorative street lights, as I reported back in December, were on back order. There was contractor expects to receive those within a couple of weeks and should be installed by the end of the month. And with those installed, that will complete the project. There's some additional landscaping that will be done in parallel, but we'll pretty much have this project hopefully complete by the end of the month, early February. And those decorative streetlights will be lit, along with the two crosswalks that've got the flashing lights crosswalks to allow people to activate those and notify drivers when crossing the street. The second project I wanted to update you on was one that council awarded the bid on for Larson Lane. And the project was made possible by an agreement that the council approved on October 5th between the city and the Chambers Bay Professional Building across the street. It was a very nice development agreement, which is going to pay long dividends in terms of helping with the street grid of our downtown, get one more segment installed. So last time I reported that we were going to be beginning construction in mid-December, and it has. Mid-December of 2020, just a little less than a month ago, they started construction. You'll see earth being moved. If you drive by there, you can wonder what's going on. Well, that's as a result of your approving the bid in early December. We anticipate construction to be complete by late spring. It's a $706,000 project funded through traffic impact fees and local revitalization funds. It was designed in-house by our engineering department. So two projects. One, we're kicking off the year with Larson Lane. We're completing the big 2020 project to Cirque Drive, and we have several more on design, but I'll save that for a future report. Mayor, back to you. That's the end of my report.
Thank you, Mr. Sugg. At this time, we are on to council reports. Councilmember Figueroa, do you have any report outs at this time? You're muted.
Councilmember Figueroa has no reports.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yep. Thanks. Councilmember Keel, do you have any report outs at this time?
Thank you, Mayor. One real quick announcement. We'll probably hear more about it over the next few months, but our Sound Transit is going through a realignment process now. What that really entails for us is with light rail coming to Four Corners, Mildred, and 19th. We have a project out there that's scheduled to be completed over the next 10 years. So as we all know, there's just some difficulty around the and with a lot of the funding and sales tax throughout our region. And so with the sales tax slowing down as it has over this past year, that's causing Sound Transit to look at project schedules. And so later this month, we're having a workshop that's going to talk about the impact of those schedules. And I don't know for sure, but I'm anticipating that's going to have an impact on the dates.
Oops. I think we lost Councilmember Keel. Okay, I'll go on to Councilmember Pro Tem Lee and hope that Councilmember Keel can rejoin us. Councilmember Pro Tem Lee, do you have any report outs at this time?
Councilmember Pro Tem Lee, I have nothing to report this time. Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember McCluskey, do you have any report outs?
Councilmember McCluskey doesn't have any report outs at this time, except wishing everybody a blessed 2021 and make it enjoyable, be grateful, and take life one day at a time and enjoy it to the max as we can as we kick COVID in the butt and out the door.
Thank you. Councilmember Keel, I see that you have rejoined us. And you're muted.
I did. Thank you. Did you hear anything? Did you hear anything from me at all?
Just that the schedule was going to change for the Four Corners, but that was it.
Right. So there's that. And then I just want to also just let you all, my colleagues, know that, there's legislative sessions coming up here later on this month, and the state legislature and AWC has a lot of things that they're moving on our behalf. And we as a city also have our priorities as well. And so I would just encourage us all to do what we can to support those initiatives this legislative session. That's it.
All right. Thank you, sir. Councilmember Fleming, do you have any report outs at this time?
Madam Mayor, I don't have any report outs, but along the same lines as Councilmember McCluskey, I just wanted to say Happy New Year's to the citizens, the staff, and fellow council members. My hope too is that 2020 is not just in the rearview mirror, but it is far in the rearview mirror. I hope we never, ever again see a year like the one we just had, but on the same notion, looking forward to certainly a brighter 2021 for everyone. So it's glad, for me, I hope everyone had a great holiday, but it's great for all of us to be back and back to work and back focusing on the priorities of the city. So thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Worthington, do you have any report outs at this time?
Thank you, Mayor. A couple of things just briefly, one of which is with the Rainier Communication Commission. We have been working diligently on a Comcast franchise renewal in terms of model agreement, and that's been moving forward. City staff has been engaged with that. I think in an upcoming agenda, you'll have an opportunity to see what's coming about with that and weigh in on where you'd like to go. But that'll be a model agreement, and then in turn we will have some university place specifics that'll come out of that as well. Also, with the RCC, Radio Communications Commission, we had a leadership election, and I'm actually the vice chair now for the RCC as of first of the year. So thank you. It's a pleasure, and I've joined many of my fellow UP council members have had that role in the past. So you're very familiar with it all. And then, Mayor, are you? You'll be touching on the meeting we had with the legislative delegation on the 28th. Super. Thank you. That's all I have.
All right. Well, since our last meeting, being that it was at the towards the December and basically holiday month, not much has occurred. But on the 18th of December, Mayor Pro Tem Worthington, City Manager Steve Suggs, and some of our key staff members had a virtual meeting with our 3 state elected representatives and senator. We met with Representative Levitt, Representative-elect Branowski, and Senator-elect Nobles. And basically it was an opportunity for us to introduce the city staff, who the key people were, in case these representatives and senators had issues that they needed to get in contact with staff. It was an opportunity just to basically let them know what our problems and difficulties were, how we could support them in their initiatives, and just basically open a line of communication with them. We also presented them with our legislative proposals that we had discussed and passed in December, so that they could hit the ground running come January when the legislature started their business. So it was a nice opportunity just basically to meet with the 3 of them individually. So I appreciated that time to get to know them away from the hustle and bustle of the election circuit. So other than that, again, as I stated, December was pretty much a quiet month, so not much else went on. So with that, that's all the report out I had at this time. So our next item on the agenda is our study session, the Pierce County Population Allocation for 2044 Target Setting. It's going to be presented by our Development Director, David Swindell. So Mr. Swindell, will you please come forward? Turn your camera on.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the City Council. This exercise occurs every 8 years or so, and it is in preparation for our next required comprehensive plan update, which is due in June of 2024. That is the base year. The horizon year for our planning is 20 years out, so the horizon year is 2044. In preparation for this planning effort, we are required to accommodate the forecasted population, housing, and jobs that are forecast for that time period. The Office of Financial Management comes out with rolling forecasts, if you would. They're required to by the Growth Management Act, and those forecasts is what we typically used to plan for. They came out with a low, high, medium, and high population for the county, and then the county different jurisdictions in the county would divvy up the population growth, if you would, and decide who was going to take what based on trends, based on local knowledge, that sort of thing, and other factors such as vacancy rates and the such. However, since 2040 was adopted and now with the new 2050, both include the regional growth strategy, and they would like to obviously plan for growth rather than just allow it to occur willy-nilly. And the regional growth strategy assigns, if you would, population and job growth to various regional geographies. And in Pierce County, that would be the metropolitan city of Tacoma, the core cities of Auburn, Puyallup, Lakewood, and University Place, high capacity transit communities. These are new regional geographies were adopted with 2050. They were not included, not all these were included in 2040. So they've updated their regional geographies in 2050 to include the high capacity transit communities, including DuPont, Faircrest, Fife, Parkland, Spanaway, Midland, Mid-County, and Sumner. Cities and towns like Bonnie Lake and Buckley, Carbonado, and Eatonville, and then the rural and urban unincorporated Pierce County. So this is another, again, it's an exercise that we go through at the county level to divvy up the population. Now, the memo that I prepared and the attachment to it, which is a memorandum from AHBL, talk about what we have to do and how we're going to get there in this population allocation exercise. Vision 2050 forecasts that the central Puget Sound area will have 5.8 million people and 3.4 million jobs by 2050. According to PSRC, the region had 4 million people and 2.2 million jobs in 2017. The difference is a growth of 1.8 million people and 1.2 million jobs between 2017 and 2050. So what we've got here is, in order to divvy up this, we've been given a portion of that growth in the core cities. And the second page of my memo is actually taken from Vision 2050. And it's hard to read a little bit, but core cities in Pierce County would take 23% of the growth, or approximately 85,000 people. Again, that's divvied up between University Place, Lakewood, Puyallup, and Auburn. Now, Auburn's is both in King County and Pierce County. The southern area of Auburn, Lakeland Hills area, they were annexed into Auburn previously with the county. Ironically, I was the planner who took that to the hearing examiner. That whole plan, that was years ago. So, and then jobs, another 44,000 jobs, again, in that 17 to 44 period. So a lot of people and jobs coming. So because that is a 17 to 50 year number, we're actually not planning for that in this next comprehensive plan update. We're just planning for the 20 years. So we're planning for a subset of that 85,000. And that subset happens to be, according to PSRC, 60,900. So the basically, we've had 2 meetings. I've had 2 meetings with other representatives from the core cities, facilitated by AHBL. We've been given, we've looked at what our forecasted population increase would be in that 20-year period. Actually, it's more of a 24-year period because it's from 2020 to 2044. Currently, over the last 25 years, we're increasing with about 210 people per year. But from 2010 to 2020, we had a slight uptick, and we're up to about 220 persons per year. So based upon those linear projections, it looks like we're going to be at about 37,500, if you would, according to a linear forecast by AHBL, and I think OFM. And then for my estimate, which I combined both from incorporation to 2010 and then 2010 to 2020, and a slightly different rate there, came up with a slightly higher number, but within 1,000. Now, so we have the capacity and the zoning, especially with our form-based code, to accommodate all the population that has been suggested that we take in order to implement Vision 2050. And that that is based on our current percentage of current population in the core cities. So the entire population, current population in the 4 core cities is 146,200. Our percent of that is 22.81%. And that means that PSRC, if we just went straight by percentages of existing population, we would grow by 13,000, approximately 900 by 2050 or 2044. Again, the difference between our linear growth that we have experienced and what Vision 2040 would, if you just went on the percentage of existing population, is an additional allocation of 7,000 or 9,705 people. So, which is double our current growth rate. We have the capacity. And so the discussion tonight really evolves around how much more population should the city be planning for than what we've seen as a trend in order to implement Vision 2040 or 50 rather, and the regional growth strategy. So to meet the planning, so this is in preparation for the comp plan update again. So we'd have to consider how much more infrastructure, how much more facilities and services, how much more housing and the different types of housing that we should be talking about, should be considering in our next comprehensive plan update, above what just the trends have given us. So again, there's consequences to not coming up to the table and agreeing to plan for more population, but there's also consequences of planning for too much, because they're going to hold you to it. So you plan for it, whether you're going to get it or not, you're required to plan for it. But at the same time, if you don't meet those targets, they say, well, you're not meeting your targets. You've got to do other things. We're going to mandate some changes. We're going to, not certify your comprehensive plan or conditionally certify your comprehensive plan update, which happened to Pierce County and a number of jurisdictions in Pierce County, as I think you're all aware of, last go around with the certifications. I've done a little bit of calculating based upon the forecast that I put together, which indicated that by 2044, we could have a population of 38,500 approximately. If you took a plan for additional 10%, then you'd be looking at planning for 38,900 or, really 39. 20% would put you up to 39,500. 30% up to 40,000. So you can understand where I'm going here. Again, I would not recommend planning for more than 50% greater growth than we're likely to see, because again, we're going to be held accountable to accommodate that, or that's going to be our target. So that's my presentation. We know we can reasonably expect to be at 38.5 in 2044, but should we plan for maybe 30% more than that, which might be 40,000?
Okay, at this time, are there any questions or comments for Mr. Swindell? Councilmember Figueroa, you raised your hand, and then Councilmember McCluskey, followed by Stan Fleming.
Thank you, Mayor. This is Councilmember Figueroa. David, thank you for the presentation. Excellent comments. Most of us have been involved from day one with you since 2010, with all this designations occurred and all the history. And a big conversation that we've had through the years is this being conservative about population growth. I know that there's this big deal that population will come to Pierce County and to UP. That is true, but we also need to tailor it down, because we've seen the increases. even from 2010 to 2020, it's only been like 3,000. And so I think that I would recommend and highly suggest our council members would consider and recommend to be more on the conservative side at the 38,000 population, and try to, that way we're not obligating ourselves more than we should, because infrastructure is harsh. Not attracting developers and property owners to build more is not the easiest thing. And especially with a lot of unknowns about the economy in the near future or in the next 10 years. And to boot, we can always adjust later on for more population. And what I'm saying, we can say, 5 years from now, 4 years from now, if all of a sudden the economy just goes, bonkers and people want to spend a lot of money here and looks like people want to move to UP, we can make some adjustments. But I think that we need to be very conservative on the obligations we make to the regional council and not be put under the gun like we have before about what we're going to do and then say, well, you have to meet them. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Figueroa. Councilmember McCluskey.
Thank you, Mayor. I too am agreeing with Councilmember Figueroa that we should be more conservative than not. I don't want to be held under the gun and then having our regional growth center designation pulled from us, because we fought so hard to get there. And yet I want to play the game to ensure that that stays a regional growth center and that we are included in some of the high capacity transit in adjoining communities. And I reflect on that label, and I note Furcrest is in that area and they're to grow 55K. Where? And why are they a high capacity transit? Well, maybe that's their future planning. I don't know what's on their comp plan, but I see that change in Furcrest, it totally will change the scope of that little sleepy, cute city.
Yeah, I think that's because of the sound transit.
The citizens will be in tune to that. And so in the core city position that university places in, I understand it on a high level, but what does that really mean in the details in going forward? If in fact we do a conservative approach to our population growth in the future, how will that impact some of our visioning and goals that we put into our regional growth center and the form-based code to encourage more transit capacity and capabilities, as well as diversity in transit throughout the regional growth center areas, and to concentrate the allocation of this population in those areas as well.
Okay. Councilmember. Oh, okay. Are you done?
That was a question.
Oh, a question. Okay.
That wasn't a comment. David, do you want me to reframe it? Rephrase it?
Well, yeah, please do.
That was a long one.
I thought it was a comment.
Yeah.
I was typing. So I understand you want to be a conservative approach. You want to maintain our regional growth center designation. So I got those 2 points from you. I got from Councilmember Figueroa to also be conservative in our numbers and suggest that we can adjust in the future if need be.
Okay, well, let me short circuit my approach to be a little more direct.
Okay.
So, Core City, they're envisioning 60K, 60 plus K.
Yep.
We want a conservative approach. So we're going down to what is it? 27K.
Yeah, we're what they're doing is Vision 2050 is assigning 60,900 more
Right.
people to the 4 core cities in Pierce County.
Yeah,
If we were to just build to our current trend, our last 25 years, we would increase our population about 215 people on average for the next 24 years. So we would be adding here about 5,000 people, just over 5,000 people in that 20-year period. And we would end up at about 38,500.
right, okay.
If we decided to be, go a little higher than that, it would be up to, like 10% more, it would be 38 or 3,900, for example. Now, if we take our percentage, as I was indicating, our current percentage of population of the 4 core cities, which is 22% of the 150,000 existing population, then we would be expected to have a target of about 47,000, which is 10,000 more. Double, literally double our growth rate.
Right, okay. So, and you're projecting that it will be, that maybe a 20% growth rate is more reasonable?
If you went at 20%, it would be at 39,500.
39,500, okay.
Yep.
Because
We've
your
said
projection right
20%
now for
more.
2024 would be about 37.
Mhm.
Believe that's what you stated before.
Well, we're now at 33,310.
Okay, right. And then you quoted by 2024, maybe 37K.
No, by 2044, we'll be at 38.5. The OFM forecast was 37.5.
I see.
And my forecast is a little different because we had an uptick in growth between 2010 and 2020, a slight uptick. So I combined those two and came out with about 1,000 more by 2044. So my number is 38.5. The OFM's number is 37.5, approximately.
Okay. And then if we don't meet that goal, any repercussions, or we just?
Well, what I said earlier is just because of our trends, our linear trends, we'll probably have a reasonably good chance of getting that number if we just continue growing at the same rate we've been growing. But by doing so, we won't be, if you would, implementing Vision 2050. And maybe PSRC or other cities are saying, well, you got to take your fair share. You got to at least take a little bit more than what your trends are showing in order to implement the regional growth strategy. So I hear you wanting being conservative. Do you want to plan for 10% more, 20% more? It's going to, each percentage is going to raise the population by approximately 500 as a target.
Okay. And the predictors that you have for our population growth, does that include the school district growth as well with and some of the other potential?
No, this is just straight population increase year over year.
Okay. So there's no real function.
And it's all linear. It's all averaged out.
Oh.
Some years we get 400, some years we get 100.
Okay. Well, frankly, I don't really care what they think.
Yes.
You know, I want what's reasonable for our city and what we can do, because if we have to make the goals that we state, then I want to ensure that that's made. So at least we say, here's what we did and here's what has happened, and be accountable that way, not to their numbers and their trends and their expectations. Flip side, I don't want to lose a designation or put that in question and to be conditional again. I don't want to go down that road. And
me neither.
Initially, they said way back when, these numbers, are just numbers. If you get it, you get it. If you don't, you don't. Now they're putting the hammer down and screwing the screws a little bit tighter, and that's not fair because we can't control the market dynamics that are out there. And the economics that drive the population in our town either, we can't control that as well. and we have a lot of open storefronts. It'll be maybe a reconfiguration of how people do business, maybe more virtual, and that may not increase our population because then people have leverage all around the world to work and make money and bring it into our region. So this is aggravating, and no one has a crystal ball, and to be accountable to it. Bottom line is, don't lose a regional growth center. Play with the number. If they come back and say your regional growth center may be put in question in your capacity to maintain high transit and the economic development drivers and the work, job, and home ratio. I don't want to lose that component.
Yep.
We worked hard. We have form-based code now. We redesigned, we reconfigured. I want to make sure that we play our cards right and we keep an ace in the hole.
Yep.
All right? Okay.
I got it.
Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Fleming, followed by Mayor Pro Tem Worthington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I too just want to echo my sentiments with regards to conservative growth as we do that. Certainly, maintaining the regional growth designation is important for multiple reasons. But when we look at growth's inevitable. How we choose to manage it is really our decision and not anyone else's. Back to Councilmember McCloskey's comment, since our inception, the city has really been forced, and I use that term, as it is. We've been forced to accept the regional growth numbers, always under the veil and the threat that if we didn't do it, there would be penalties assessed to the city financially, which again, I resented, and I still do to this day. Because I think at the end of the day, it really is up to the leadership of our community to determine what's best for it, not some other entity out there that is basically with a thumb in the wind, choosing what number is appropriate for growth. Supporting our infrastructure as we grow is critical. When we look at some of our major arterials that are already functioning at a level D, I'm not sure how much more we can accommodate as we move into the 21st century here. Streets, schools, transportation, and business are all key components to managing that growth. And if we, just go for the higher numbers, and as David, you pointed out, we miss those numbers, then the risk to the city is significantly higher. My 10-cent take would be, let us grow at the rate that the community can accommodate as it grows, but that's not one of the options we have. So, as we deliberate this, I would absolutely shoot for the lower, more conservative number that I think is in line with our current rate of growth, knowing there's going to be fluctuations along the line, but I would not join for anything higher than that. And if we had our way, I would just say, phooey, we're not doing it at all. We'll just manage our own growth and be done. But that's, like I said, not one of the options we have. So
thank you.
There.
Mayor Pro Tem Worthington.
Thank you, Mayor Bellisi, and thank you, David, for putting together the details and good set of information. Always an interesting discussion. So we look forward to every 8 years or whatever the cycle may be, something like that. And I've worked on this in a variety of different chairs over the last 20 years, I think. So in any case, like the rest of the council that have commented, my interest is also being conservative in our estimates. You had mentioned appropriately that this is a lineal estimate or averaging, meaning it's year upon year, a straight line growth. Of course, growth doesn't occur like that. It occurs in a sine wave that goes up and down, and it's wavy as it goes up. And so if we look at this last decade, the first half of this decade, we had almost no growth, the first 5 years. The second 5 years, we had comparatively significant growth. On the average, it was maybe 10%, 11%, something like that. And in most cases, it is about a 1% per year is, I think, what
Yep.
most communities grow in our area and in the region, and that's been our history as well.
True.
So, you know, conservative on it is good. PSRC, though, has targets. They're going to push back if we don't take a piece of what they perceive to be our share, unless the rest of the county's core cities wish to take more. I don't think that's likely. Everyone's going to be pushing back, and it's going to take a bit of a negotiation at the table for, you know, the next year before we get to a number that is our planning number in this horizon. And the reality is it's going to, I think, ultimately need to be a bit more than the 38,500, which is a realistic conservative number. We can get there. We have the capacities. I was trying to estimate what that number is on the planning horizon at 2050 if we used the PSRC fair share of, what is that, another 13,892, is that what I'm reading here? To our 33,310?
You are muted, Mr. Swindell.
You're right. Yeah, that table that's on page 3 of my memo actually was provided to us by AHBL.
Okay.
So that one that says the 2044 population forecast of 37,000 that's the OFM's linear.
Okay. What's the
one
number?
that you see at the one at the 47.2? That's based on the PSRC's, would be the PSRC's number for if we took the same percentage of our population with the other 4 core cities. So our percentage of the total population of those 4 cities is at 22.81%.
Mhm.
So
Okay.
if we took
And so by some,
22.81% of the 60,900,
Mhm.
We would grow by basically 13,900
in the target year 2044.
in the target
Okay.
year 2044. Yeah.
And so by some calculation, that is an estimate of one way to get to fair share. I'm
That's
sure
correct.
there's other ways to
Yeah,
other ways
that's
to get to
one
fair
way to
share.
get to fair share.
Yeah.
And I can
Okay.
tell you that neither Lakewood or Puyallup are interested in taking a whole lot more.
Yeah. I wonder why. Yeah. So. Yes.
I think Auburn's
So,
willing to take some more, but
yeah. Well, we can, yeah, another 500 there and we'll have it all solved. Okay. Well, it's going to be a negotiation. We want to start, you know, I'm all for being realistic, but the reality is if we wish to continue in the PSRC framework and receiving transportation grants that we get $2, $3, sometimes $4 million a year from, that PSRC is the gateway for us to be able to get many of our street improvement, sidewalk related and other federal grants. So they do carry a bit of a hammer on this, and we need to figure out what that fair share is and what's realistic for us. So I'm with all the other council members that have gone forward saying, let's be realistic, let's be conservative, but the reality is that number probably is going to need to negotiate higher. I don't want it to be any higher than it needs to be.
Mhm.
So, but being in the PSRC game does get our citizens things that they seem to cherish in terms of walkable community, better transportation systems, and that make us an urban center. We also, over the near term, my crystal ball suggests maybe this is us coming of age now. Maybe large metro urban areas may not be quite as attractive as they were, and other satellite urban areas have a new attraction that might push for our growth for a while until the sine wave turns the other way. And so for a few years or maybe a decade. But ultimately in that 20-year horizon, it's a straight line is where we are. So, okay. Thank you, David. I don't know if that helps. Good luck, and I'm sure we'll hear more.
Okay.
Councilmember Pro Tem Lee, you had a comment or question?
Yes, I do. Councilmember Pro Tem Lee, I want to thank David for his presentation. I don't have anything more to add than what's already been said, other than I certainly support a conservative approach to this goal setting. That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay. I understand Councilmember Keel has been having internet issues and that he is on the phone. Do you have any comments or questions at this time? If so, you need to *6 yourself to unmute.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. So, great. Yeah, and I apologize. This is the worst my net connection has been ever. Over 7, 8 years of working full time from home. So I've never had this in any of my meetings. So I apologize for that. I just briefly want to say I agree with everyone that's talked about being conservative. But I also agree with Mayor Pro Tem that talked about, that alluded to, we're going to have to play the game with PSRC because of the dollars that are attached and all the other goodies that we get being in that game. I think we have to be realistic about that. The other thing about that game is, in my mind, these are my words, it is a game, because for years they've given us unrealistic numbers and we've never met them, but because we went along, we're able to participate in the dollars. And so my suggestion is that we continue to walk that way, be conservative, but understand really what this whole process is all about, and leverage that to our citizens' advantage. And speaking of our citizens' advantage, my interest going forward is to do, like I say, work with the numbers, but also really change the game in our favor. And again, what I liked what Mayor Pro Tem said was that I believe that there is a pivot, to coin the word that people are using now, on what businesses and people are looking for. It's not big urban, it's suburban, and it's areas just like how we are right now. I mean, it's evident with all the high-end businesses that are either looking at us or coming to us, as well as all the other things that are happening now with University Place. And it's the stuff that we've been talking about for over 25 years. And I would suggest that we double down on that this time going forward. And in a way that, as Councilmember McCluskey said, about focusing on our regional growth centers, making sure that everything that we do in our planning going forward really centers on that, and we begin to build those regional centers that are centers that will attract those Fortune 1000, Fortune 2000 companies to locate here or have satellite offices here, to send their kids, their employees to our schools, to walk our parks, to take advantage of Chambers Bay, all of those things that we talk about. I'm suggesting that we bake that into our plans even more going forward. I would like for us to focus on all of the infrastructure things that the PSRC will have and others will have going forward, that will focus on Four Corners, 19th and Mildred, things around electrical, sewer, water, fire, security, the street grid, the fact that the Tacoma Housing Authority is going to be building all those apartments over in the James Center. How do we focus business over there to accommodate for those citizens, albeit outside of UP, but they're just right across the street. They can come across the street and use and be customers of the businesses that are actually inside our city. So I would like us to focus on that. Places where we don't have sewer in our city, going down to Day Island and those other places where we've been talking about for a long time. I think we need to double down on planning and leveraging those dollars that are going to be going forward in that area as well. And I'll stop there, but staff probably has heard me enough. I'm pretty passionate about all those things, and I've got a lot of ideas and things that we could be doing about those areas, but those are just starters. But David, and Steve Sugg, my conversations for the next 3 years I'm going to be on this council is going to be to set us up to look to the future and to really strengthen and really focus on the things that we've been talking about for 25 years. And let's double down on that and keep that going. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you.
Mr. Swindell, I think the council has pretty well stated their viewpoint. I totally agree that with PSRC, we do need to be as conservative as we possibly can get away with. I know from the time I was on the Planning Commission until my tenure here on City Council, the numbers that PSRC has been forwarding and requiring jurisdictions to adhere to have been totally unrealistic, as evidenced by our growth since the implementation of the Growth Management Act. We continually rewrite and redo our regulations and our zoning to allow for more growth, yet the economy of it, the economics of it for the private developer hasn't been there for it to occur. In the 25 years since we've incorporated. We've yet again made changes to it to help incentivize it with the form-based code. We may see a temporary blip of that coming up in the next couple of years, 3-4 years. But to project our growth at what was originally decided at 60,000 plus, we have always stated was unrealistic. I can see us getting more towards closer to 40,000 on it, but after a certain point, you reach a point of no return where your community has been so overgrown and so maxed out that the field that brought the original 40,000+ people here no longer exists because you can't get from point A to point B. So at some point, PSRC needs to take into account the reality of how growth occurs, not just blanket putting numbers out there and expecting everybody to adhere to it. And they continue to add more and more requirements on us with the threat of us losing the precious funding that we have for transportation, and that irks me too. We're not objecting to the growth. We're just objecting to the fact that they hold the carrot out there. If you don't comply, you're not going to get the much needed funding. And they're the only source of that funding for us. And I object to that. So I do agree with the majority of the council members that have expressed the concern that we need to kind of hold our guns on this and try and be as conservative as possible with the numbers. That does not mean that if by 2040 we realize that the growth is going at a fast pace, that we can't make adjustments to do the upward take of what's needed. But if you reach the max and you plan for the max and it doesn't occur, and then you get the financial implications, that is what's wrong with this whole picture. So we have a proven history of showing where our growth has gone during the good times and the bad times. We may get a slight explosion here in the next few years with some redevelopment, but I don't foresee us tripling or doubling our existing population within the next 20, 25 years either, because it's all driven by economics and the private development, what they want to invest in our community. And we certainly don't have the resources to pay them to come and do it just so we can meet some objectives with PSRC. So I'm going to be in concurrence with the rest of the council, and that we need to be conservative.
Right.
Council Member Figueroa, you have a final comment?
Yes, Mayor, thank you. David, we talk about trying to be conservative so we don't get stuck with consequences. What I don't understand is, like Councilman Keel said, we need to double down and take advantage of any infrastructure and goodies that we may be able to get. Let's say we do double down and say, okay, we'll predict and give us all the money to be able to build things out to that degree. But like Denise said, and I will say it, and that is that we don't control the market. We can't make people move in, and we can't stop people from moving out. So what are the consequences? So we say yes, and we don't meet them, and they gave us the money, and we already used the money. What could they do?
I think the idea is that, there's the buildable lands requirement, so that make sure we have enough capacity to accommodate the population. I don't see that's a problem now that we've got the form-based code. I think we've got plenty of capacity. But I think if we gave a little bit, like I said,
that's not
maybe.
The point is, what are the consequences? How can they do this? What can they take away? They can't take away the streets.
No. Once they've given the money, it's done. But I think future allocations is what we're talking about here. They regional growth centers is key to the regional growth strategy. We've got one. I don't think we're going to lose it, but
okay,
there is an expectation that we take some more.
I'm trying to get to the point. What are the actual consequences that they can?
The consequence, I think, would be that they would take away the regional growth center designation.
That's it.
That's all primary.
Future applications for transportation funding, we would score low on.
Right.
Yeah. That's the result, is then we'll have less priority for transportation funding, and Jack will just have to build less.
Okay, good enough. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, I believe we've had all the comments on this study session, so I'm taking it that you will be in negotiation, and as things happen, you will keep us abreast of any possible changes and so forth, correct?
Will do, yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. Okay,
right.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Members of the City
Mr.
Council.
Swindell.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Okay, at this time, the next and final item on our agenda is the Town Center update regarding Lot 1 and Homestead Park. And I will ask Eric Faison and Gary Cooper to come on screen for their presentation.
Thank you, Mayor. Gary and I are here tonight to discuss with you all, give you a high-level overview of what we're looking at in terms of redevelopment in the town center, specifically Lot 1 and Homestead Park. This is an item that will be of discussion at the retreat. So the purpose of tonight is not necessarily an in-depth dive into every element of this plan, but basically as a prelude to orient you, and maybe even perhaps between now and the retreat, if you have questions, you can ask us about them as we begin this process. So if we can pull up the PowerPoint. All right, as I just mentioned, we're planning on making some significant investments in 2021. The idea is that we have grant dollars as it relates to Lot 1, and we also have LRF dollars as it relates to Homestead Park. And so it's how we begin to utilize these to maximum effect. Next slide, please. So this provides you with some context. You see where City Hall is located. And what we're looking at is the continuation of Marketplace. As you know, our long-term goal is to extend Marketplace through Lot 1 and then have some sort of promenade that would extend through the park. Next slide. So in the last legislative session, the state legislature granted us just shy of $1 million as a grant to invest into public improvements as it relates to Lot 1. On your screen, you'll see a list of items that we are looking at investing in. And I think the general idea is to make the lot ready for development. So when Virus, who has exclusive rights to purchase Lot 1, obtains a tenant, it's something that can move very expeditiously. So the types of improvements we're looking at as you look at this, at the slide there, is sidewalks that would basically go all the way around Lot 1. If you'll notice on the Bridgeport side of Lot 1, there would be additional parking stalls, back and angle parking stalls like exist in the rest of the town center. You would also see those same sort of back and angle parking stalls on the Drexler side. It would include a new street that would run east-west, south of the current 35th? I can't tell. So it would run basically along the north side of the park with a promenade that would run through the site. That promenade currently as proposed would be sufficient to allow a police car or other cars to go through if necessary. But the primary grid road would be the east-west road north of the park, which would provide both parking for the park as well as visibility into the park, which has been an item of concern. Any questions about this slide?
I do not see any hands. Oh, Council Member Figueroa, followed by Council Member Stan Fleming.
Thank you, Mayor. Eric, I'm not sure where all this is coming from, but I guess this is why this is a study session. But I don't believe, and I know well, we worked hard in getting that $1 million for Lot 1, as you remember, and so I don't believe it was for this kind of improvement. It's more for the additional parking that is usually a big nut to crack for developers in order to attract developers to come in. So we're getting away from the parking prepping for parking to help any future development, not this, especially the street. And I'm really astounded that this even has been proposed, because unless a developer comes in and say, this is what I really would like in order to develop, and you guys pay for it, why would maybe a developer would want to not have a street going right through the lot and have the whole lot to develop? So this is not, unless I hear some real good explanation from you guys, this is not what was talked about earlier on, or do I think this is the right move in prepping this for development? Somebody's on drugs.
I guess I should clarify. I'm glad this is a study session. This is the first time we've really had a group discussion on all of this. I might have had one-on-one conversations with some of you about this. This was a tough nut to crack. As you remember, council member, you were involved in this, is our original desire was for a lot larger dollar figure in terms of a state grant. we did some analysis on what the cost would be to build structured parking on the lot. And we did this in working with Verus, our preferred developer. And the number was about $6 million or so. And with $1 million, we worked with Verus and we said, okay, what are the things that we can do to get the lot ready for development? So ignore for a second the promenade between the buildings you see there. That's not part of what we're proposing to develop. What we're proposing to develop is everything around the site. And the main reason why we're doing that is because with the state dollars, we have to maintain ownership of whatever we build for a period of 10 years. So if we were to be able to build structured parking, the full garage or a significant portion of it within the site boundaries, we would have to maintain ownership of that. That would make sense to do if we were building a significant percentage of it. But at $1 million, there was not really the ability to make a significant impact in building structured parking. So when we had this conversation with Verus, the thing that we came up with is we could do all of the infrastructure around the site, including bring the utilities such as water, sewer, and electric right up to the site, as well as that grid road, which is the east-west grid road at the south end of the site. So this was
but you have a new street in here. So I heard what you just said, but that would mean that we need to delete new street. That really is pretty. It's a big deal.
So you're saying between the buildings?
You're right.
Right.
If
so
that's not part of what this whole thing's about, then it should be taken off.
Yeah, if I could finish. So we're talking about investing the money to the infrastructure right up to the edge of the site. The street that goes north-south in between the buildings and the buildings, everything within that box basically that is between the sidewalks on all sides would be not improved. It would be vacant. That would allow Verus to work with whoever their preferred tenant is to fully develop that portion. So
including building that street.
Including building the northwest street. The goal is that we would have that street, but that
okay, well, I understand that, but when you say Lot 1 investments, I see it as UP Lot 1 investments, not the developers Lot 1 investments. So we need to just have some clarification here. If it's UP Lot 1 investments, we need to take the new street out.
So this was illustrative of what we're talking about in the bigger picture. But what I'm trying to describe in terms of what our investments,
Eric, it should be a footnote. It should not be as a main entree into this whole UP Lot 1 investments.
Okay.
That's my comment to this to what's going on here, because it's not clear and it's not painting the true picture.
Okay. What I was trying to describe is if this is not an appropriate illustration for you, is what we're talking about developing are the sidewalks all around the site, the road with the parking that you see at the north end of the park and the south end of the site, all of the utilities, sidewalks, streetlights, etc. Everything within the box would be left for the developer or future discussion that we'd have with the developer.
And I heard you loud and clear, and I
Okay.
understand. All I'm asking for the purpose for this council and future study sessions and for the public, which all this is available to, is to clarify when we talk about Lot 1 investments, University Place, City University Place, Lot 1 investments, and take out the street and maybe make it as a footnote, that is future developer may put a new street in between or whatever, but I just want that to be clarified, because in the future, I don't want to have to deal with the public or any other council members that the intent was to have a new street and for us to invest in it. I don't want that in writing here, like the way it is here.
Well, I think what might be more helpful, because I think this view actually is important, because things such as that new street are going to be requirements on the developer to build. So it's important that you have that context. But I can't.
You're not listening.
Add a slide.
You're not hearing me out.
If you hold on just 1 second,
Then
if I can add a slide.
You're not hearing me out, Eric.
What you just said.
Then make it as an addendum to this, addendum A to the city of UP and showing the street that the developer would have and what it would look like, but don't make it as part of UP Lot 1 investments.
And I was just about to say that, Councilmember, that we would add a slide that makes clear what the investments are of the city so that it's all clear. It's important to have the greater context, but it's also important to, as you noted, specifically identify what we would be spending our grant dollars on. Does that help?
Yes and no. The new street should not be part of what UP investment should be. If you want to show that as a greater vision of what may happen there, then it should be a new map with this showing this as what might be a development proposal from a developer. But, I would take that street out because that's not the intent of University Place to invest in.
I think we're saying the same thing, actually.
Okay, so the next time we see this, we're not going to see new street when we're talking about Lot 1 investments from UP?
The new street I was referring to on this was the east-west street, but
I understand that.
You'll see 2 slides, one which will show the greater picture, and then one that will show the UP Lot 1 investments as you described.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Councilmember Fleming, you had some questions.
I do, Madam Mayor, thank you. Eric, thank you for at least getting the conversation going, and I too am glad this is a study session. But this is, what I've heard so far is really more of a deja vu of conversations in the past, and it too concerns me. The city's policies have been when there's new construction that we, as you astutely pointed out, build the utilities up to that property line, i.e. gas, water, whatever, sewer goes up there. But it has been the city's policy for developers that development, construction of sidewalks adjacent to a piece of property and a street, as Councilmember Figueroa pointed out, has been a developer's responsibility. Your proposal is a major policy change for the city. As subtle as the comments are, it is a major policy change, for us. So, I guess it's a conversation, for the council to have whether we are going to start absorbing those costs for sidewalks and streets adjacent to newly developing properties, or is that going to remain the responsibility of the developer? And I heard you make the comment earlier that, the cities has to maintain that for about 10 years as city property. Well, we have in the past had developers put in sidewalks, and they in turn had to deed that over to the city once it was constructed. So, we already have processes in places to do that. So while I'm infatuated by the slide in the proposed development, if that's a proposed development or a potential development, I should say, you're presenting in a very subtle way a policy change that I think the council just needs to weigh in on and then make a decision one way or another. And then we kind of go forward from there. So, and I too share the concerns about, the sidewalk and the street, just for the record, that's all.
I guess in response, Councilmember Fleming, these are state dollars, grant dollars that we receive specifically to facilitate economic development on this lot. And so the idea was that we would leverage these dollars to reduce the cost of development for this site so that we can sell it and achieve the type of development we wanted to achieve. This is not unlike what we've done in the rest of Town Center. The park right in front of City Hall was built with $1 million grant that we received from the state. Almost all of the sidewalks and clearly most of the parking garage were city funded with the notion that we wanted to achieve a certain development typology. The cost to develop structured parking and office building on this particular site are such that we may not be able to achieve that without some degree of public investment. And we've been fortunate that we've gotten that public investment from the state. So the whole notion here is to reduce the cost of development so that we can achieve a development typology we would not otherwise be able to achieve.
So I would agree with what you're saying to a point. You know, you're making sense, but I would also throw this out, you know, since again, it's a study session. It's kind of like when you're fishing, you put a little bait on the hook until you hook the fish and then you reel it in. The $1 million, no, let there be no misunderstanding, is part of that bait. You know, granted, when we did the previous projects, the city got its $1 million to build infrastructure, but as this council has pointed out in the past, and rightfully so, the city took the bait, and then we poured millions of dollars out of the city money to beef up property so that they could be, quote, developable. And then this council got saddled with the bill of trying to sort out how to pay it back. So I'm not biting the hook the second time on that one. You know, the $1 million is great for, you know, helping to offset costs, and we can certainly do that. But by no stretch of my imagination am I saying going to buy into let's use the $1 million and then, oh, by the way, come back, because $1 million is not going to put in the sidewalks that I see in this diagram. And it's not going to build that street. That doesn't cover the cost. So while we offset it with $1 million, somewhere along the line, the council's going to have to come up with additional funding if we elect to do it. And, you know, there's 6 other members who may have differing opinions. But we will have to come up with additional funding to cover the cost, because when you look at how much it costs per linear foot to lay a sidewalk, not cheap. How much it costs a linear mile or linear, I don't know what they measure streets in. I thought it was linear mile. That is horrendously expensive. So while $1 million sounds like a lot of money, and it is not going to cover the cost of this proposal that we're looking at right here.
And a little later, I'll get into the dollars available for all of this. Definitely not talking about going into any sort of debt. This is not Town Center Part 2, where we're looking at leveraging the city's debt capacity for this, but we'll get into that a little bit later.
Yeah, but you know, again, I want to keep in the forefront of the conversation. You're making still subtle as it is. This is a policy change, you know, for the city on who's going to be covering the cost of streets and sidewalks that adjacent new developments going forward. So this isn't the only project in the city coming up. There's other projects, as you know, and I know, and the rest of the council knows, in which developers will expect the Me Too clause in their developments if we bite off on this one. So those are my comments, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember McCluskey, you had your hand raised.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Eric, isn't there already sewer and water to the property, because this was our administrative and city council site?
I'll have to, you know, when we get to the retreat, I'll have to have Jack Eklund speak to that. But as I recall, there was some issue related to bringing those directly to the site. Just as a reminder, this site is all owned by the city, obviously. It to do what we're talking about doing here would be an amendment to the binding site plan and Vera's forfeiting their rights to part of the property. So the road, for example, east-west road that would be built just north of the park and that parking, as well as that little bump out piece that is to the south of the parking along that road there, we would be requesting that they relinquish their rights to that property and not change the price of the property. So,
Okay. So are you saying where on the southern part where there's cars parked and then it abuts into the foliage, that those pieces you're requesting will remain city owned?
Correct.
Okay. And all right, I'll be interested in Mr. Eklund's presentation on why there's no water and sewer to the existing site and how he foresees the engineering of that. There's always a caveat, I know, because you assume that it's already there. It was there once.
I'm assuming that the water and sewers to the site, but it's also a matter of making sure it's at some appropriate grade, because we'll be regrading to build that grid, for example. And presumably they want to put it under the street. I assume that it's going to be along those lines. So.
Okay. All right. And then the other comment that I had is that when I was on the Parks and the Planning Commission and on to the first tenure of my city council, we were all discussing that this Lot 1 development is a crown jewel as the one that Whole Foods is sitting on. But for me, it's more so because it abuts our beautiful Homestead Park that we will probably in the future discuss a redesign to, so that it's a more practical and safe and beautiful environment. But that's another discussion piece. We'll get to that later. But for this particular discussion is that the building was not to be a barrier to the park. So aesthetically, from our town center project, people will not see a building barrier, but see an access point to the park to continue the walkable feel into Homestead Park from our town center proper. The view and the vantage point and the welcoming piece to the use of the park, and also a safety component would be that you could see into the park from our town center area. And so that was how the vision was going for many years in the past. Certainly the city council can bring it back to the table to discuss it. I think it'd be a more reasonable discussion once we have a developer with a realistic site plan and to talk about some of that. I don't want the council to get into the weeds of things, but to just ensure that the feel and the flavor is maintained aesthetically for that component. That buildings should not be barriers to park accessibility, but to be open and airy and allow a free flow of walkability, not only from the front end through Bridgeport and the backside, but also towards the town center proper as well. And so that's my comment in regard to the design schematics and what I would be looking forward and excited to see if that vision continues. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Pro Tem Lee, you had a comment?
Councilmember Pro Tem Lee. Yes, Eric, we've discussed this. You and I have discussed this plan before. I had envisioned, and perhaps wrongly so, that the only street that was involved in this was the east-west street. I had thought that what is now being referred to as a street was more of a pedestrian walkway to expand on what Councilmember McCluskey just said, where people would walk from town center or the village to Homestead Park. And also the way that the artist rendering of this street with its many jogs, I don't see that as being a street, but rather a pedestrian walkway. I had thought, wrongly so again, that there would probably be bollards at the north and south side of this that could be retracted if police emergency services had to use that as a street.
That's part of the problem of.
You're muted there, Mayor. What'd you say?
Nothing.
Councilmember Lee, you are correct. That is the intent of this. And next slide, please.
I need to do this.
Okay.
And you see here that, it's not designed for cars. It's designed to talk about that vantage point, that viewpoint, as Councilmember McCluskey mentioned. Next slide, please.
I believe Councilmember Pro Tem Lee, were you done with your comments? Because I think Councilmember Figueroa had some a follow-up question or comment.
I just want a clarification from Eric that was not a vehicle street as such, but could be used for emergency services, but rather a pedestrian walkway to have access to Homestead Park. It was a question.
Right. We've combined this presentation because we felt that these two sites, Homestead Park and Lot 1, are connected. And the idea is to make sure that as we move forward, they are developed in a connected way.
Okay, thank you. That's all.
Mayor, this is Keel. I have some comments too.
Okay, Councilmember Keel, since Councilmember Figueroa has already had an opportunity to speak. Councilmember Keel, what are your comments?
Great. Thank you, Mayor. And thanks for the presentation. And I certainly think the conversation that council has had so far has been very rich. And I agree with others that have talked about wanting to make sure that we don't go down a slippery slope in a town center 2 revisited type of scenario. I certainly am not for something like that. At the same time, though, I understand the policies that we've had in place for a long time, and I'm using my air quotes around those words, could have been, some of the reasons why we had Town Center 1 in the first place. And so I don't want to arbitrarily lock our hands by saying we've never done this before, just outright and not do it because of that. I would like to recognize we've never done this before, but also work diligently with staff to turn over every room to see if what is new and that we've never done before, if it will work today in this scenario that we're in today, and not just lock our hands and say, hey, we've never done that. That's not our policy. We're not going to do it. So my encouragement to my colleagues is that we stay open, but diligent and resolute about not wanting to get into a mess, but making sure that we're open to different and new ideas and things that we've not done before, in order to meet the need for today. My last comment is agreeing with Councilmember Pro Tem Lee in his observation that the thing that we're calling North-South Street is street, air quote. It really was and is, my understanding was, it was a pedestrian walk, where you got that street that's currently in place now, that's between Lot 1 and the town center proper, and Lot 3 or whatever that is right there. But when you got south of that into Lot 1, that's where it was a pedestrian walkway that would lead all the way through to Homestead Park. And on that backside between the Lot 1 and Homestead Park, there was a real street that was used for deliveries and police access and stuff like that. So, and Eric, I didn't hear you say that in your presentation. I mean, you used the word street, and I think that's what may have gotten us off kilter. I think if we'd let off that, hey, this is a pedestrian walkway, I think that would save some cycles. So anyway, I'm excited about Lot 1. My last comment is I think we're all there, but I want to make sure that we all don't lose sight of the prize that, as Councilmember McCluskey said, it's attached to our park, and it's like the crown jewel. It's the bookend to where Whole Foods is, and we need to knock it out of the park when it comes to, so to speak, when it comes to getting whatever we're going to put on that lot, and couple that with the lot behind it. I think that's Lot 2, whatever that place is right next to the fire station. We need to really be good about what we put in those places. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Keel. Councilmember Figueroa, do you have a final question?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I really do appreciate it. Eric, can you go back to the first slide, please? Eric?
Yes. So is that, you see it?
Not yet. First slide.
Oh, the very first slide?
Yes.
Okay. Linda?
Okay, so I think getting back to what Councilmember, I guess the second slide. Go back to where the street one, the one that I talked a lot about. I guess the third slide.
Right, it's this one.
Linda.
This is the slide I had up when you were talking about the street.
Oh, well, go 2 more.
Those were all the slides, Councilmember. Which one did you prefer?
Well, the one that has the street, well, we're going to call it the walkway in between.
Go back, right?
So
it's this one.
This one.
I don't see it yet.
Maybe just
Okay.
hold on a sec. And I think this is the one you're referring to.
There we go. Okay, so the comment that Councilmember Fleming mentioned, and I do agree, and that is that, you mentioned the $1 million, and forget about so-called street and the inside of that box, but the sidewalks, street lights, on-street parking, potentially utilities, or the upgrade of utilities, that's over $1 million easy. So, and I have several comments I have to make on this, Mayor, so please bear with me, Council, but this is really important, and that is, so if $1 million isn't going to cover this cost, which I already know, I don't have to be an engineer and architect on the cost of all these things. We're lucky if a quarter of that will be spent just getting everything set up. Where's the money going to come from? So if we don't get any more grants to finish.
So, Linda, can you go 3 slides ahead? 1 more, maybe. Okay, go to, hold on 1 second. Go to
Slide number 9.
So slide number 9. All right, so these are the funds available. We have the amount of the state grant. We have the city match, which we've already have budgeted. We've had for several years of $668,000. We have 2.8, almost $2.9 million in LRF funds remaining. And I stuck park impact fees in there, but our intention is not to use park impact fees. I put that in for information purposes.
Use park impact fees for sidewalks and street lights.
So if I could complete this. So our thought was the first two items were for mainly for lot one. So our match of the grant, the remaining amount of our match, as well as the state grant. So that is a little, what's that, 1.5 million, 1.6 million. And then we have LRF funds that we were proposing to use, as Gary will talk about a little bit later, on the park improvements.
Okay, so, okay, let's go back to that one, because that's going to be a big issue, where that money is going to come from, that we know for sure, so that we're not taking money from anything else on our budget for this. Number one. Number two is, I do reserve comments. I understand Councilmember Kill's comments and Fleming's, and that is the policy that we're setting. I know we own this piece of property, and I know that we don't want to be stuck saying, well, we can't do this because it sets a precedent. We have to be careful about that. But I am sensitive, just because it's our properties, that we give more, we go after, we're giving preference to our own properties, and I'm sensitive to that. It's just like it's been sensitive in the past with the town center, where everything was built out for because it was our property, but other, other areas weren't. So that being said, getting back to whether it's, I have to, Councilmember McCluskey, with due respect, I don't believe that the vision was 100% there, that this will be an airway from the town center to Homestay Park. Many, many times in the conversation, even before I even got on the council and during, there was many times talked about a hotel sitting right in the middle of this thing, an office building of some sort right in the middle of this thing. And so that was never this this whole thing that, wait a minute, the design standard, and this gets me to what is the design standard for any developer coming in and saying you must develop this pedestrian or not. And we have to be careful about the design standards, because that's what killed the previous town center for many, many years, because it was too restrictive, telling the developers how to develop that lot. And yes, we may want that airway, but the marketplace might say that's too expensive for us to build it, number one. Number two, meaning us, meaning I'm talking about the developer to build it, and to, in a developer's mind, may need all that space for the actual development. And so unless it's, and I don't think there's a design standard that mandates and requires that. Without that, then that is not a legitimate something that once we sell this to a developer, unless we build it into the negotiations or as a design standard, which is the most appropriate way to tell them what to do, we may not have that. And I would suggest that we really be careful about how we restrict this property if we really want to sell it, and we need to sell it. We've been paying a lot of money to sell this to a developer, and now we're thinking about putting another, $2 or $3 million, $4 million bucks on more infrastructure. So how we determine or restrict the design standards for what we want so we can provide an airway, we need to be careful. But right now, we were talking about this airway, for better words, that's what I'm going to call it. I don't believe that we're there yet. I don't believe that it was the vision. I don't think there's a design standard that requires that. So that's a whole new discussion there. Lastly, my last comment is parking. That's always has been a big issue throughout all of our developments. And all I'm hearing here is the parking that we may put in and maintain, which is never going to be enough for the buildings and the use of this. Hopefully it's retail. and not office, more office. But, you know, I'm not hearing, which is the biggest expense, and that's what kept the town center from being developed, is nobody wanted to pay for the parking unless we put money into it. This meaning we, the city, put money into it. So certainly want to hear more of that before we move forward. Those are my comments, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, if I may, I
Yes,
just
please.
wanted to say that as far as design standards, under our development agreement, that's built into when you sell the property. I mean, design standards are built into our development agreement. And when you get a proposal from Verus, you will, you know, be able to review and discuss and et cetera, the design standards, not the design standards, the exact design of what's going to be within that box. Right now, as you adequately and appropriately pointed out, Councilmember Figueroa, what we're really talking about is the area around the box, except for that southern road. So that's where we're talking about putting our investments.
I just want to make sure that our council members that talked about saying this is really important about the airway, that's not really something that's required as a design standard, and a developer could come back and say, you know what, at the end of the day, and we have seen developers change their mind because of money or whatever other, or because of who their tenant may be or the user may be, that they say we can't do this, and unless we have a requirement, and we can't go back and say no, you can't do it unless pass a design standard real quick. That won't work either. So I think we really need to be, you know, cautious about how we're saying this is how it's got to be done.
Yeah,
And
I just want to be clear that I wasn't, I didn't mean that. The other thing I want to point out in terms of public infrastructure, we applied for this grant with the idea that we would be installing public infrastructure for private economic development. That was very explicit in our grant application.
Right.
And that was true of almost all the town center streets and sidewalks were built by the city. If I'm not mistaken, and City Manager Sugg could correct me, I believe, or Gary Cooper could correct me, I believe that most of the sidewalks installed along Bridgeport were done via grants. The sidewalks installed along 27th were done most recently by grant. The sidewalks on Grandview were all done by grant. We generally don't have money and to do these, and they are for the public good. So I was under the impression all along that this sort of investment of the sidewalk, street lights and stuff were stuff that you all in doing the application were supportive of, and that it would help reduce the costs that a private developer would have to do in order to facilitate this development. So that's why when we had our discussion with the developer, Verus, we talked about structured parking. We talked about the best ways to utilize these funds, which are really limited compared to what is really needed to build, for example, a 200, 300 stall parking garage. You know, this was what we collectively, along with the developer, thought was the most appropriate thing to do, both in terms of our requirements to maintain the property and in terms of reducing the cost of future development at the site.
Okay.
If there were no further questions, I would move on to Homestead Park.
Thank you.
Please go ahead.
And so if you can go back to slide number, I believe it's 4, and I'll turn it over to you. Oh, this is quickly, the one before that, the timeline. This is a really rough sense of timeline. If we were to proceed forward, we're looking at finalizing design by June, soliciting bids in July, both getting council approval of the final design work and the bids in August, and the work beginning in August and complete early next year. Now we'll turn to Homestead Park.
Thank you, Eric. in my area, one of the big questions for me and the Park Commission and ultimately the council is, how does Homestead Park evolve? How will it be compatible with town center development? This slide you see here is page 69 from the adopted pros plan. And the heavily dotted white line is Drexler there. But we did discuss heavily that there needs to be some evolvement of Homestead Park. The project needs to be more than just adding some features and a promenade to the park. During the pros plan, Vision 2040, and flash vote public comment periods, we received numerous comments regarding the accessibility and usability of Homestead Park, concerns or perceptions regarding safety in the park. So one of the priorities of the adopted Park Commission 2021 work plan is to review the GGLO consultant draft plan for integration of Homestead Park into the greater town center development, including the public comments gathered from the last 2 years of outreach. Next slide, please. As I said previously, the project needs to be more than just adding some features and a promenade to the park. We want to address the comments included within the pros plan, examples such as limited visual access, hiding spots created by oversized plants, dark once you get inside, play area too small, and limited police accessibility. The Park Commission, in addition to reviewing the comments gathered from the public outreach, their review will include inviting public safety, including Chief Primo, the planning and economic development committees into the planning and review process. This is on the screen is just one example of renderings that they have. And the white line is the promenade that goes through. The little white boxes are what could be like pop-up tents if you wanted to have a farmer's market or an event such as that. In the football-shaped portion in the center is a lawn and an event space. There's some trails in there, and these are just to get the juices flowing when the groups get together to talk about things. But currently, unless council says something differently, we scheduled GGLO to come meet with the Park Commission and Public Safety Commission on January 14th, again on February 11th, to help refine the designs, review all the comments that we received during these public comment periods, and try and refine it down to something that we could then bring back to council. But we ultimately, from my point, I want to make sure we correct the perception of the park as unsafe by increasing usage or activities within the park, provide for various interests, additional lighting, resulting in a park that is safe and feels safe. While I believe our park is safe now, it doesn't feel safe, and I don't feel safe when I walk through them in the dark. So, but we want a park that's usable and an asset to the overall town center development. And I'm not naive. I know this is going to be a challenge. You know, right off the bat, I'm going to say it before you ask the question. What are you going to do with the roadies? I don't know. There's so many roadies added there over the years, including council was kind and planted a memorial roadie for when my father died. But that roadie was 3 feet tall when it was planted. It's over 8 feet tall now and probably 8 feet wide. And I'm a realist. I know that we can't just say, well, that was planted back there in early 2000, Gary, and it can never be removed, and it's more important than the park. But this is going to be a big challenge. I think that'll be the #1 challenge that we have to get over within the park is how do we address that properly? I've already reached out to Dr. Becker, and I don't know how many of you know him, but I know Councilmember Fleming does, and talk to him about what we've got going on. And he even agrees that the roadies now, some of them need to be removed, some of them need to be pruned severely, And we need to assess what is the possibility in rearranging where they're at, moving some possibly across the street, or other options. So I'm just throwing that out there before you even ask the question, because I know from my standpoint, that's going to be a big challenge. But looking at the comments we received over the last 2 years on all of these outreach, we need to update that park and make it usable. It needs to be a welcoming, safe place. And right now, it doesn't feel that way. So how do we evolve that into the new town center development? And that's going to be the challenge that the Park Commission's willing to take on. We've already reached out to Public Safety and Economic Development, and they're have agreed to join us along with the consultant to come back to council with something that we can be proud of, to say this is what we recommend for Homestead Park for the next 20 years.
Mr. Cooper, as a resident that utilizes Homestead Park, I appreciate the fact that we're looking at redesigning it. My concern is until we have an actual site plan for Lot 1 to make any major infrastructure changes to Homestead Park, I think is a bit premature. I would appreciate if the Parks Commission and all the other commissions that are looking at it, including the public safety, look at baby steps. What can we do until we have an actual site plan for Lot 1 that would make the park feel safer? What small things can we do? How many roadies, for instance, can we relocate or remove from the site? But to make the big infrastructure changes with the promenade, the white line on this, and all the other hard infrastructure, without knowing if the project will actually interface, I think would appear to be putting the cart before the horse. Unless we are at a point with the developer that we're going to be coming up with a site plan for Lot 1 that we can stick a pin in and say that this is going to happen. Those major infrastructure changes I'd like to see being taken at a slower pace. That's just my opinion.
No, I think you're right on, and I would agree with that. And Eric can possibly correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that we need to have a plan so we know what we're doing. Incremental changes, the problem with those is without having a larger plan to make sure that the changes you make are not being undone later. But we're on the same page, Mayor.
Okay, yeah, because I mean, we do need a big plan, a long range plan, but that big plan is based on what actually occurs on Lot 1. And if, let's say, the schematic that we have on Lot 1 does not turn out to be what eventually happens, and we end up with one large building that blocks Marketplace from it, investing the infrastructure for a promenade is wasted dollars. We hope in the design standards and the wish that's there for a town center does say that any development on Lot 1 should interface with the rest of Marketplace. And one would hope that the developer can find that tenant that will agree to it and that they can make it pencil out. But, the building may move 2 or 3, or the promenade may change where it accesses Homestead Park, but hopefully in the end, the two will mesh. So that's all I'm asking, is that we slow down what the Parks Commission and the Public Safety Commission do and not generate a final site plan for this, and be a lot more thoughtful about what the future brings.
Mayor, I guess I would like to note the one caveat here is, as Councilman or as Director Cooper mentioned, we're planning on using LRF dollars for this. which we probably aren't supposed to hold on to forever. So timing this might have some complications in that we'll have to talk with our city attorney in terms of arbitrage rules and that sort of stuff, what the timelines are that we can have to expend this money. And it doesn't have to be expended in the park, obviously. You can spend it on something else, but spending it somewhere else would preclude probably this size investment unless you're going to use park impact fees or something else to make major park improvements.
Okay. Councilmember Figueroa had your hands up.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And Eric, just on that note, and that is, you mentioned the LRF, because that was a big question that I have about the funding for this. But you mentioned the LRF, but we voted and having the LRF for the purpose of the town center economic development, not for recreation and parks. So I'm questioning why would we use that money for this purpose, number one. Number two, and I don't propose that we do that. There's plenty of other places that we need work on. We still got that lot over there by the fireplace. The other thing is in utilizing, because the park impact fees are for capital projects only, we have some already there, but it would take all of what we have now and any park impact fees that the new development would accrue, but that might take all of it, which would then we would not have anything for any of the other parks that we have been talking about. And so I have great concerns about that. So I think before we go too far, I would like this council to get before we start engaging with the public or commissioners or anyone else, is give us a much more detailed summary about where the funds and appropriate funds that we would agree to, and what does that mean if we use all the park impact fees and to the other parks. And on the flip side of that, some of this comments that I've heard are more ongoing maintenance types of costs, and park impact fees is only for capital projects. So, all this major work that you're talking about, is there going to be an ask from our budget to do so, or is there money already there that all this work can be done without an increase in budget or having to establish additional funds for that?
So what we were proposing is all the work, both on for public infrastructure, both on Lot 1 and Homestead Park, be funded via the funding mechanisms that I showed you on, is it the next slide, Linda? Be funded with these funds, not including park impact fees. So this is a good study session for you to orient yourself to this issue. And then at the retreat, it's perfectly reasonable for you to have the in-depth conversation about whether this is how you want to spend these. So this is a council decision. So I don't want to come. I don't mean to be coming to you with a conclusion. This is what we shall do. This is the staff's recommendation based off some of the other policy decisions you've made up to this point, and certainly you guys have the flexibility and ability to make different decisions and send us down a different path.
So, this is just a question. I'm not debating this. Is LRF funds legitimate funds for park capital projects and other improvements?
Yes.
Okay, good enough. Thank you.
Okay. Are we done with the presentation at this point?
If you go to the next slide. Sorry. So The idea is at the retreat that you would provide us feedback on both of these, the park plan and the timeline. At the retreat, assuming that you like this plan, which you may not, so take this with what it is. You would provide us feedback on particular issues that you want the Parks Advisory Commission to dive into and come back with a recommendation based off of public input. And then we were proposing to, if we're ready to proceed to have an architect work with the commission throughout this planning process and throughout the public outreach process, and come back to you with a timeline. So that's kind of the steps we were looking at. Is there another slide?
So there will be further discussion on this.
At the retreat on both topics. And this is similar to the Lot 1 timeline. These projects could be bid as bid alternatives as one bid for economies, or it could be bid separately. If throughout this process we determine that there's a specialty that needs to be had, but this is kind of an example of what a timeline might look like.
Madam Mayor?
It's really aggressive.
Yes, Council Member Keel. We're fast approaching our anticipated end time, so I'm going to have to ask Mayor Pro Tem and Councilmember Keel if we can get a motion to extend.
Yes, Mayor, and I would move that we extend tonight's meeting scheduled to end at 9 o'clock to 9:15 p.m.
I'll second. It's Councilman
Okay, I
Keel.
have a first and a second. I don't see any objection. So our meeting has extended. Okay. Council Member Keel, did you have a comment that you wanted to make in regards to this?
Yes, Mayor, I do. Thank you. I would just make a request during our retreat when staff comes to us with this plan laid out and we talk about it. The piece that I'd like to, with dates and all that, and I'm sorry, I can't see the screen, so I know you guys are looking at it and it sounds like it's aggressive. Was one comment I heard. The one thing I'd like to add to it, if it's not there, again, I can't see it, are the dollars that we have available, all the potential dollars and where we could spend them. And it sounds like many of my colleagues feel that the dollars that we've talked about so far won't cover the full work of all this stuff. And so I would ask staff to kind of guesstimate where the dollars we have will run out, and then have a part of the plan some potential places, ways, other areas that we can get these other dollars to have a full project. And what I'm driving at is that we talk about the plan, about what we want to develop and possibility, but I also want to couple that with the money and where we believe that we can get that. And then that way council can have a fuller conversation about this whole project.
Okay. Councilmember Fleming, you had a comment?
I do, Madam Mayor. Eric, could you go back to that slide that showed funding sources and what have you? Where did Eric go?
I'm here waiting for Linda to pull it up.
Oh. Where did Linda go?
Hold on. I'll share.
Okay.
Here you go. Can you guys see
I
that?
might be the only one on council, but educate me. What is LRF?
That's a local revitalization funding tool. It was a state, basically it's a state grant, and we had to bond for it based off of a revenue source that the state gave us every year for 20 or 25 years. So it can only be used for public infrastructure investment and in the town center zone. And so we have a lot of broad discretion on the expenditure of those within the limitations of it being public infrastructure for economic development. And there's a list of items that we can spend it on.
So when we applied for that funding originally, I don't think your proposal was on the radar screen. So obviously the city had something in mind for those funds. What was the original intent?
We tried to make it's kind of broad. So it includes park, it includes, we spent it on public garage, we've spent it on roads, we've spent it on sidewalks, basically all the public infrastructure in town center.
So when the city applied for this money, we had a list of projects we wanted to fund?
No. We were actually a demonstration project. So the legislature was toying with basically tax increment financing.
Okay.
And so they created basically a grant to cities of a certain amount every year. And for us, I believe it was $500,000 a year for 20 years. And you were required to bond that money. Well, you could have for a time period expend it by year, but essentially you had to bond for it. And back when you were here, Councilmember Fleming, I believe there was something called LIFT. Do you remember that?
I do.
This is the updated version of LIFT, basically. In fact, I think you presented with me on LIFT at one of the presentations.
I did.
Back in the day. And so this is the updated version of that.
So is this the balance of the money that's left?
Correct.
And
We actually had run out of money. We had spent it all, but interest rates had dropped dramatically, which allowed us, maybe it was 2 years ago. No, it was maybe last year. We refinanced it, which created more money. And this is the more money that was created from the refi.
So in the refi, this money doesn't buy down debt. It's just set aside to spend on whatever projects we wish.
Yep, because it's not really city money, it's state money, and it's pursuant to this policy. So this was it's basically grant funds.
Okay, and if we didn't have this project, where would this money be spent then or allocated?
That's a good question. I don't have an adequate answer for you.
I mean, I know typically the city always has something in mind for projects when we have money, so I'm surprised that we have money with no plans for it. That's a first.
Our intention when we did the refi was to spend it on lot 1, but that's when we did the analysis and the discussion with Verus, and there was a determination that there wasn't enough money to do something that they regarded as meaningful. And so we suggested instead that that's where we got to. Let's build the infrastructure around the site and let's invest this in improvements in Homestead Park. So the combination of these funding sources would be for those projects.
Okay. I'll probably have more questions later, but thank you for answering those.
No problem. And I would encourage you between now and the retreat, if any of you have any questions or want additional information, please reach out and let me and Gary know, and we can do whatever research you need us to do or come prepared to talk about it at the retreat. I can't hear you, Mayor. And that is the end of our presentation.
Councilmember Pro Tem Lee, you had your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I have a question for Director Cooper. What part, if any, has the Park Advisory Commission had on generating this diagram, this rendition that you showed us of what Homestead Park would look like? Was it just through the pros plan, or did they actually vet this diagram?
When the pros plan was getting started, we actually had GGLO come to 2 different park commission meetings and had a dialogue with the park commission. They showed some rudimentary drawings there and got some comments back from them. And in the draft plan, it was narrowed down to 2 kind of closer to options. So they have had, of course, it's been a year ago now, over a year ago now, I guess. But they did have 2 meetings that the consultant came and had a dialogue with the commission.
Okay, good. Yeah, I would just want to make sure that the public has had some input in what this is going to look like, because it's their park, and I think their inputs are important. Anyway, thank you very much.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem Worthington, you have your hands up.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Just a second. Let me see if I can get my hand down. I was getting tired. Okay. So I had a couple of clarifying comments, or questions rather, for Eric, and maybe one for Gary as well. But Eric, first off, when you said earlier that the park improvements are qualified for the LRF fund, that's principally not because it's a park, but because it's in the geographic area of the LRF. Is that correct?
It's both. And so
Okay.
LRF has a list of what types of projects qualify for LRF funding, and park improvements are included.
But if we wanted to go spend that money on CERC, just to take an example of another park, could we?
We cannot, it's not in the zone.
Okay, it needs to physically be within the zone and also meet a criteria of certain types of improvements or use. Okay. The other thing was, you mentioned that the LRF funds has some expectation we're going to spend the money. It just can't bank it and live off the interest, for example.
Correct. And that relates to arbitrage rules.
Yeah. So we need to do something with it at some point, and perhaps this is it, or maybe there's some other opportunity we've yet to identify. So this has a clock on it of sorts, but it's a fairly loose clock. It isn't like we need to spend it by midnight or by December 2022. But there is some expectation that it be spent. Did I characterize that about right?
Correct.
Are there other timelines on other money sources we need to keep in mind?
I believe that's a good Matt question. I believe as it relates to infrastructure, park impact fees and traffic impact fees might be on that list, but I'm not sure exactly what those timelines are.
Yeah.
And how are we doing on the state grant? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm actually more focused on the state grant issue. I think, as you know, the legislature is set to convene next week. And with the recent COVID issues, there is certainly some financial apprehension down there in Olympia. What we have been informed, at least so far, if this were a typical year, we would generally have an end of the state financial year deadline, which would be on June 30th, 2021, to commit those funds. If they're not committed, there's generally a standing request to reappropriate those for the next financial biennium through 2023. But with the current environment that the legislature finds itself in, it's really a question of, are they going to sweep those funds or are they not? It doesn't sound like, based on the information we've had, that those are being actively targeted for a sweep, but we can't say that for certain either.
Okay. All right, good. Thank you. I just wanted to touch on those because we have some money in hand and some opportunities with that, but we need to decide where our priorities are. I guess, and there's, as far as since the Homestead Park idea is already adopted in the PROS plan, the Public Parks Recreation Open Space Plan. We have the ability to move forward with that if council and the community chooses to do that. So we have what authority we need, I guess is my point. There isn't any major hoops we need to go through to get further authority if we decide it's the proper thing to do.
Correct.
Okay. Great. Thank you. That's really just wanted to clarify a couple of quick things. Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you.
We have less than 5 minutes on our extension, and Javier, you have your hands up yet again. Can you be brief on your comments?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Real quick, the LRF, when Councilmember Fleming was talking about where else can we spend it if we had any other choices. Number one, I guess I need to rewind. When we talked, I distinctly remember we were talking about for economic development. That's why we went into debt. That's why we wanted to do this. And I love the parks, don't get me wrong, but that's not economic development. It is kind of a sidebar to that because the way it's connected, but it is not. We still have lot, the one by the lot next to the fireplace, and also the one on 35th and Bridgeport. I think that's 10 that is yet to be developed and may need some improvements. So we should be making sure that the other lots that we still own that are still there up for grabs from a couple of developers to see what improvements we're going to need on the street, just like this one, to make it work for them. And so to me, I believe it should be a priority because that's what these funds were initially achieved for, not for the park. And to say, well, we don't know of any other projects and let's throw it in the park is not, to me, a legitimate way to expend these funds. We need to look at the other lots in order to get them off our backs, because we spend a lot of money on borrowing money to get those lots and to sell them off. And that should be the priority, not the park. That's number one. Number two is on the deadline. You talked about, Steve Worthington, you talked about, alluding to the deadline, but let's get to the point. What is the deadline, Eric, for the LRF? You mentioned there was a deadline and we need to get that spent. So what is that?
No, what I said was that I'd have to talk with Matt about the arbitrage rules. When you issue bonds, you're supposed to spend a certain percentage of the money within each year. So I don't know it off the top of my head. Well,
we need to do that because, you early on in the presentation, you alluded that this needs to be expended, like there was an urgency to that. That's how I felt. We should not be pressured into this urgency unless we really need to know those timelines, because maybe there isn't any, because we got two other lots we need to spend money on potentially and most likely. And the last one, and thank you, Mayor, for this, and that is this whole thing with the commission. And we've heard a couple of comments from council members about before we get the commissions involved, we haven't really figured out what we want to direct them to do. And you're talking about having the commission come together in February. That's next month. And I don't see this being resolved exactly in the next retreat unless you put 6 hours into that one subject, and that retreat is set for what, 4 hours, and we have all kinds of stuff on it. I don't think so. This is really huge, and we need to have either a good allotted time for us to really come together and say this is then what we want to do, and then put it together as a resolution like we have to give a directive to the commission as to what we want out of them, because that's really the process. It isn't just, well, it sounds like certain council members agreed, and so let's tell the commission what to do. That's not the process. The process is we pass a resolution directing the commission what we want them to be studying and recommending back to us. And I don't see how in the world we can get to that point for you to put together a commission meeting and start this whole thing off in February. I just don't see it. Thank you.
Okay. This will be studied in further detail, and as staff has indicated, if you have some questions, please reach out to them so you are prepared to discuss this in detail at our retreat on the 23rd of January. So, and I'm sure we will be having future discussions about this as we move forward. With that, we have reached the end of our allotted time for the city council meeting. So unless there's some real urgent matter that requires a further extension, I am going to conclude and adjourn our meeting this evening.
Bye.
We are adjourned. Thank you.